Thank you for joining us today. Today I'll be interviewing or talking with John Spooner, who is the co-CEO for Greystone Communities. John has been and continues to be a thought leader in the senior living industry, a great leader and a fantastic speaker. And so thank you for your time.
I look forward to this.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of diving in and doing this interview, looking at some of your background, looked at your education. You're from Iowa originally.
Yes.
Drake University is in Iowa, I believe.
Des Moines,
right in the middle. And then you end up going to the University of London.
Yep.
And then after that, University of Pittsburgh.
Correct.
Talk a little bit about what drove you to go to London, and what were some of the takeaways that you got from that experience?
Well, when you grow up in Iowa, it's a very small world. And after 4 years at Drake, which was 4 years or more Iowa, I wanted something different, something a little more adventuresome. So this opportunity presented itself. It was a big growth opportunity for me. I enjoyed it greatly. I learned a lot. I was really unencumbered by any roles or responsibilities, so I got a chance to really personally develop during that time.
That's wonderful. Well, I love the perspective of different cultures and kind of how they learn. And so kind of fascinated me that you did that. So then you go to the University of Pittsburgh. Fast forward a little bit. How did you end up getting into the senior living industry? What was that path?
Well, there's two parts to that answer, so bear with me here for just a minute. During my senior living career, talking to a lot of people, it's surprising, really surprising, the number of people that did not start out to be in senior living that are on the low side. A few people have had this as a career aspiration. But on the other side, it's really surprising how many people that are in senior living will speak to or profess a profound relationship with a grandparent or a senior-aged person that impacted them, that gave them the communication skills or the love of senior adults. So my path to senior living started really when I was in grade school and junior high. My grandma was a profound influence in my life, as many grandmas are. She had 4 maiden sisters. So there was 5 girls in the family. My grandma was the only one that ever had children. So she had a boy and a girl. The girl got married, moved away. The boy was my dad. He stayed in that town, and now being the only male caring for 5 elderly women.
Wow.
So by the time I got to junior high, all their husbands were dead.
Oh, man.
And none had offspring. So all their care and feeding, trips to the hairdresser, trips to the doctor, trips to the Delphian Club, trips to the United Presbyterian Women's Club, whatever they had to go, if they weren't driving, they would call my dad, and my dad would get tired of this and send me. So I could get a driver's license in Iowa at 14 on a hardship case, because it was a farm community, a very small farm community. And so my job became the care and entertainment of these 5 elderly women, starting when I was about in junior high. So what do you do at recess when you're in 7th grade or 8th grade or 9th grade? You go outside, you play kickball, you flirt with the girls, you try to hang out with your buddies. My weekdays were scheduled one lunch each day with a different one of my aunts or grandma. So when I went to my grandma's for lunch, we played canasta. When I went to my Aunt Nell's for lunch, we would just sit and talk about events of the day. She was a very worldly kind of person. When I went to my Aunt Merle's house, she was very intent on trying to make me a better man. So we would do things like, set the table, how to work in conversations. When I went to my Aunt Nina, she was a home ec teacher, and so the two of them really ganged up on me about social graces and that kind of thing. And my Aunt B was the youngest and was probably would be considered the most radical, and she exposed me to all kinds of stuff. So and that was Monday through Friday, every day, every lunch. So my buddies were playing kickball, chasing girls. I was sitting with my aunts and grandma. So I can still play a mean game of canasta, I'll tell you that. But nonetheless, that kind of set the stage about how to communicate with seniors, how to be around them, how to be comfortable around them, which is an important key factor. So that's really the first part of the story. So I didn't set out to be a senior living person or a senior living career. During the Great Recession of 81, I guess not the Great Recession, but the recession of 81, some of you will remember that interest rates on a mortgage were 16 to 19%. Nobody could sell their house. The company I was working for was a real estate company. They pretty much folded shop during that time, and I didn't have a job. So I'm looking around for a job, married, one kid. You can start getting real tenuous about your future, not knowing what to do. Jobs are hard to find. So I was approached about a position in senior living sales. I didn't know senior living sales from a box of rocks, but they paid. I had insurance for my family. I had a check coming in every month. And that company was headquartered in Des Moines. And so I thought, okay, this is going to be great. Well, they had much different plans for me. And in the course of the next several years, I moved a number of times because there wasn't really a career path in senior living at that time. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't considered a industry or as it is now. So I moved from Des Moines to Kansas City, to Des Moines, to Columbus, to Pittsburgh, to Denver, to Dallas, all trying to up my senior living career, improve my skills, and make a better living for my family. So those were all moves within the senior living industry, trying to learn, grow, and develop a career that I fell in love with. I just really felt like I was comfortable in that space, and was able to make a difference in those communities in which I worked, because it was all those were all individual communities. It's a lot of movement. So that's kind of how I got here. So I ended up in Dallas in 1986 working for Greystone, and have been here ever since.
So 1986, are you coming up on 25 years, or is this your...
No, this would be almost 35.
35 years, that's right.
Well, you're in sales math, maybe.
Right. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, good point. So, wow, okay. That's quite the journey.
Yeah, it's been a good one. I've enjoyed it.
So along this path that, education and then the moves around, you've been very successful ending up at this point, and Greystone's been very successful. What are some of the habits or routines or things that you've done over the years that you think have helped you continue to be successful? And all those moves and all the progression kept moving you forward to really where you're at today.
In the early part of my career, when I was directly involved in face-to-face sales with seniors, it took me a long time to understand that there was really no fear in asking them any question. I have probably had the same reservations about asking a senior about their health, or about their money, or about their intentions, or about what their future plans were as anybody. And as a sales counselor, some of those things can be very daunting. Some of those things can be awkward to discuss
Sure.
with a more or less stranger. And so I learned to push through those. I had to practice it, by the way. It wasn't just something that I just woke up one day and go, oh, I got to ask tough questions, or oh, I got to ask more probing questions.
Yeah.
It was something I had to really concentrate on and something to learn, but it paid off. And I truly believe it paid off for those people I was serving in terms of an enhanced life and the enjoyment of senior living. So then, as I moved away from being a sales counselor, retirement counselor, I got into sales management. At that time, nobody knew what a sales counselor was. Nobody knew what a retirement counselor was. There wasn't systems, there wasn't CRMs, there wasn't digital, there wasn't any of this stuff. So it was old-time sales management. Sit down every morning, hit your leads, how many calls you're going to make, who's going to do what to who, what's the next step, how do you get this person moved forward. And so it was a very intense thing, and I learned almost by accident how to be a good sales manager. And then one thing leads to another, and I find myself in a bigger and bigger role in sales, and which moved into marketing, which moved into development, which moved into Greystone.
And you, one of the things that you mentioned was it wasn't something that just came. I mean, you had to put a lot of work in. You had to ask tough questions. You were uncomfortable at times because you knew I got to push myself forward. I have to ask some questions that could be maybe perceived as awkward. And I think kind of my next thought point here is speaking. You speak all over the country, sometimes weekly, monthly, I mean, all the time, all over the place. And you're always received very well. I mean, I've heard you speak multiple times. You have a way of delivering a message that I think resonates with people.
Thank you.
And talk to me a little bit about that. Have you always been the guy that was really good at presenting? You know, high school, you have speech class, and college, you give presentations.
Well, that's a good place to begin, was high school. Remember I said I went to school in a very small, rural Iowa town. In my high school, there wasn't enough of us to fill out all the activities and teams. So if you didn't go out for the football team or the basketball team or the wrestling team or the this team or the that team, the coaches would come to you and give you a little slip of paper and say, not enough people went out for the debate team.
Yeah, you're up.
Yeah, not enough people went out for the golf team. Not enough people went out for the wrestling team. So I was appointed, selected, drafted, whatever characterization you want to put on it, to be on the debate team and the speech team, now called forensics. And so that was really good training. I had a speech teacher, if that's the right term, that really took an interest in me and really helped me develop a style of my own, I guess is the way to say it. And the same thing with speaking as it was with learning to drive yourself forward to ask more probing questions. I characterized them earlier as tough questions. They're not tough questions, they're probing questions. So when I look at people that have been really successful in senior living sales, and some that I've been fortunate enough to work with or even hire, and others that I observe from afar, the one universal characteristic that those people have is a natural curiosity. If you are a naturally curious person, it's a lot easier to ask questions than it is, because you can ask them in a frame. You can frame the question or in a tone that is not threatening. So I happen to be a naturally curious person. I like to look up things. I like to know a little bit, just a tiny little bit about a whole lot of things. And that curiosity gives me a perspective on life and career and family and topics that have really served me well. So when I do these presentations, I hearken back to the fundamentals that I was taught in high school. And then debate was very valuable to me, probably the most valuable single course I've ever taken in my life, because you had to be prepared with all your facts. This is old-fashioned Oxford-style debate, which is there's a question offered, there's a proposition, and there's a defense, and you go back and forth in a very natural, syncopated way of building up your case or tearing down the case. So you had to be able to really think on your feet, and most of it were facts that you had in your head, and you had to express extemporaneously. You've seen debaters look from cue cards. It wasn't like that at all. You had all the facts in your head, and you stood up there and made a presentation to the judges. So that was very valuable to me. It learned me, good English. It taught me to think on my feet. It taught me to have my presentation in my head. So to this day, I don't use notes when I speak because of that preparation. And then the curiosity thing plays for me because I can't go give the same presentation every time I speak. People expect new information. Greystone considers itself to be an opinion leader and a thought leader in senior living, so we have to be ahead of what people are thinking. We have to anticipate. We have to know where the business and the consumer is headed. So I oftentimes joke I'm paid to think like an 85-year-old woman because of our customer profile.
Right, yeah.
But really and truly, there's truth to that. The curiosity thing has really served me well, and if you're listening to this or you're considering a career in senior living sales, a natural curiosity is one of the most important characteristics, I think, that would serve you very well.
And I think back to, when we kind of started, you were talking about your aunts.
Yeah.
And you're having all these conversations about, whether it's manners or discovering different things. And I'm sure the life stories probably, I would imagine some of those moments kind of gave you a curiosity to say, you were really exposed and taught about a lot of different perspectives. You're talking about 5 different ladies, 5 different perspectives, spending this routine time with them at lunch, weekly, daily, monthly. I can imagine that carried over and has carried over through. And I think that's such a pivotal, and I think that that's something we can take away, or young sales folks can take away, is sometimes we get into the habit of doing our jobs, but taking the time to learn from others, to get comfortable talking with other people, put yourself in some scenarios to get better.
Well, the end of that story with my grandma and 5 aunts is 3 of them just basically woke up dead, just heart attacks or this. 2 of them ended up in long-term care. In those days, it was all, custodial. Term was specific, custodial nursing care. So Aunt B and Aunt Nell ended up in nursing homes. So now my visits, instead of going out to visit my buddies, were to go to the nursing home and spend 30 minutes with Aunt B or Aunt Nell at their bedside or with them or doing whatever they were doing. So that exposed me to a whole world of long-term care, much different today than it was then, that I could see how they became accepting of it, how they learned to live in a dignified manner, when nursing homes in those days were not considered a dignified place to live. People tended to pity people that lived in any form of senior living in those days. The social mores have changed greatly since then, but I was exposed to that, and so I knew all the aides' names, I knew all the nurses' names, I knew all the people that lived next door to Nina and B, and so it was an interesting education there as well early on.
The perspectives, I think the opportunities you got, it's so wonderful that you're in senior living, because there's so much of your childhood and your growing up where you experienced this, and then I'm sure we're able to carry those experiences over and say, we can do some things differently. It can look differently.
Yeah.
One of the things when you do a lot of your speaking, and one thing that's really resonated with the life care, life plan community model is predictability. And predictability is so important, right? I mean, especially, it doesn't matter what time of history I'm sure you're in, right? You want predictability and you want stability. For the, looking forward, for a lot of sales folks and marketers that'll be watching this, looking forward to Generation XYZ, do you think predictability is still going to be really that one of those top, if not the top feature or selling point? Or do you think that we'll have to change or modify and it'll be something else that'll be really, really valuable to those folks?
The world of sales literature is full of sell the benefits, not the features, sell the sizzle, not the steak. Sell the outcome, not the services, and that's universal. That goes beyond whatever little subtle changes might come or go in senior living. People for eons, and I mean not generations, I mean eons, are hardwired to want predictability. They're hardwired to want to know what's the weather tomorrow, what I'm going to have for lunch, what's going to happen to me here, what are you going to, I suppose this goes back to the Neanderthals and the cavemen. What's that mastodon going to do to me? What's the tribe next door? When are they going to attack? I want to know in advance. I want to be prepared. I want to anticipate what the future holds. People are hardwired for that. We are all hardwired for that. And when you can't have predictability, then you want consistency. So prior to predictability becomes consistency, because you learn from consistency that predictability is there. So one of the big raps on senior living is, well, I have to move in and I have to do things when they want me to do them, and I have to join into all the clubs, and I have a very structured life, and I don't want that. I'm more independent than that. So from that, the counter to all that is what I like to call a self-directed life. So if you can concentrate, sure, you have to tell them about the meals and the maids and the linens and transportation, security, utilities, activities, property taxes, insurance, and the healthcare plan. You have to get all that stuff in. And they want to know the benefits of that. Yes, of course, you can have companionship and freedom and independence and peace of mind and all that other stuff. It's all important. It's all critical to the sales process. What they really want to know is, what happens to me in the future? Who's going to care for me? I don't want to be a burden to my kids or my friends. And I want to know how this is going to work. So their lives prior to living in senior living communities, seniors' lives at age 80, can be very routine, can be very consistent, and can be very predictable. And they like that. That's why it's so hard to get them to break those patterns and move into senior living. But eventually they all come to the same conclusion. They should have downsized. Eventually they all come to the same conclusion that this is so routine that I'm bored and listless and lonely. And this is so not what I want to be at any stage of my life. So that gets them to wanting to be more self-directed. And so you think about the careers that most of us have. We spent decades working, doing what our bosses said, doing what our careers demanded, going through the motions of family and the motions of raising the kids and the motions of doing all this. And then you get to retirement and everything just kind of stops. And you're supposed to spend that period of time doing what you want to do and living leisure and enjoying life. And some people adapt very well and some people don't. And that's the first time you can really be self-directed in your life. And nobody has taught you how to live in retirement. There's not a class in it. There's not a school for it. There's not somebody you can go to. There's not an advisor. There's not somebody that's going to say, hey, Michael, you're 15 years from retirement, 20 years from retirement. Let's talk about it now. It doesn't exist. So if you can link together seniors' desire for consistency but not boredom, predictability to know that they have a plan for the future that makes sense to them, and know that they're still in control and still have a lot of self-direction in their life, it's a winning formula. And all the other stuff, I ticked off all those 10 things that are typically consistent senior living and all the benefits. All that stuff's important. But it's really about how they perceive themselves and how they view their desire for what they say is choice. They want choice in my life. But every time a senior says choice, hear the word control. That's what they want, is to control their world. And if you can give them that sense of control through certainty, predictability, and a self-directed life, the adoption of moving from a single-family home into senior living moves a lot faster. Sorry, I went on a little bit.
No, that's fantastic. No, yeah. It's such a good point you bring up about the control when you say choices. We see a lot of that. I thought that resonates with me too. Right? I mean, you can ask my wife about the control part. One more question, and I know we've talked a lot about COVID over the past, since January, February, March. We've encountered new barriers. We've worked through those barriers. I think we've been very creative and we've done things differently. And I think everybody's been affected at some point negatively during this time. But I think in looking forward, there's things that we've done or we're going to do or they're going to come out of this that I feel we're going to be positive. So maybe just a little bit of thoughts on how do you feel, looking at it from a different angle, coming out of COVID, how is our industry, senior living, going to really benefit, or what are some of these things we're going to hold on to as we move out of COVID and into the future?
Well, gosh, you can't move out of COVID fast enough for anybody, I don't think. So I'm really proud of the way that Greystone has advised its clients and its communities to address and process COVID. I really think we got ahead of it to the extent you could, as fast as it came, as hard as it hit us. And so I'm really proud of that. The consumer behaviors that came from those awful months in lockdown might be permanent. And that is, we will no doubt have to give more information earlier to the consumer. There will be a lot more dependent on digital access. Probably the senior consumers, the baby boomers, are just barely moving into our market now. And they're generally somewhat more digitally illiterate than the current crop of 80-year-olds. I don't know if that's factual, but so it probably boosted the digital literacy of our consumers 5 years really fast. Everybody had to have it. Everybody wanted to communicate with their families. that was good. The community life inside a community probably has changed materially. Probably a good thing for all the cleaning and this cleaning protocols and all that stuff is very positive. A lot more people will feel like they want to just bring help into the home. Home and community-based services are growing exponentially. We all know that have spent any time in senior living that those are not good solutions, not good long-term solutions. And so I hope that COVID will have accelerated people's consideration of wanting to move into senior living, I don't know, earlier, but faster. I just believe that as devastating as COVID has been on lives, deaths, senior living at large, that there's going to be some silver lining come out of this. I see it in the sales side first. I see it in the loyalty of the staff in communities that have gone through this period of time and had a number of COVID cases, whether they were staff members or whether they were residents, and how everybody bonded together so perfectly. It created more than a bond. It's like an embroidery of lives.
Yeah.
Instead of just oh gosh, we made through it. We're still going to go through it. There's still a lot of this going on. I don't know if that answered your question.
Oh, yeah.
But I just think that we might even be too early to really know the positives that are going to come out of this, but there will be some.
Yeah. I think you hit on something really key there, really that camaraderie. I kind of think of our communities, with our staff, with our residents. We've just seen, we've had to come together to get through this.
Right.
And it's really been fun to watch. At the same time, it's hard to say fun around COVID.
That's right.
But I think the future is bright. It's been a different year, but there's been so many good things that have happened and forced us to do. So I appreciate your time very much. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we appreciate hearing from you, and hopefully those out there will see you speak in person very soon one day.
Well, okay, I'm ready. Call me up.
We will.
Go get checks.
Thank you.